Hi everybody and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Christina said, my name is Deanna O'Connor and I'm a broadcaster and journalist, and I run the Speak Up Club, which does public speaking training for women in business originally, but we've kind of expanded our remit with the workshops for Iconic, and I'm a fairly regular contributor here on all sorts of things to do with branding, media, social media. And because I give a lot of webinars, today we decided we'd do a webinar about webinars. So what we're going to do today is talk to you about why you would do a webinar and what it can do for you and for your business. So I'm just going to pop into our first slide here. Why would you give a webinar? Well, you're all here today, so obviously you're people that are already interested in webinars, and a lot of people are. The webinar viewership, according to research by a company called On24, which specializes in that sort of thing, has found that people viewing webinars have gone up. The numbers have gone up by about threefold really since kind of the pandemic kicked in. So there's a huge appetite for it out there, and it's as a marketing tool, which is really what you could be using it as. It's really powerful in that it's really the only way that you can kind of connect in a very human way, but at a large scale. So you can be talking to your audience pretty much one-on-one and interacting with them, and really doing it in a very personal sort of manner. So there's a lot of ways you can do this, such as, you know, the Q&A, polls, things like that. And we want to show you a lot of that today. And actually, just to start off, one of the things I'd like to do is to do a little poll with you. Christina's going to run it for us here, and just to see if any of you attending today have actually given webinars before. So this is, as a starting point, one of the ways you can firstly start engaging with your audience in a webinar. So I'm just going to wait until we have everyone voted. Nearly there. So we can see from this, when we share the results with you, that a few of you have and a few of you haven't. And hopefully after watching this today, you might feel a bit more empowered to start giving webinars yourself to share your expertise and your business. So pop back into the slides there. And close that poll. So really, giving a webinar is essentially a marketing tool. And today, essentially, you're attending a marketing tool used by Iconic to sort of position Iconic as a place that is a great place to rent an office. There's a lot of community events, and somewhere that, you know, gives you a lot back in terms of information and keeping up to date on kind of latest business developments. So I suppose you might say that they're sort of positioning themselves in a thought leadership space by providing these webinars to their clients and prospects and potential people who might be interested in someday renting a desk in Iconic or renting an office there. So it really depends where someone is in the marketing funnel, what kind of webinar you want to give to them. So before you maybe start to plan what you would give a webinar on, you really want to step back a bit and think about, okay, with my audience, why am I giving this webinar? What am I trying to give to them? And what am I trying to attract as well by giving it? So at the kind of top of the marketing funnel, really, you want to think about giving a webinar to kind of promote a thought leadership kind of aspect and lead generation. So it's really very, you know, on a hot topic, informational, something that has maybe a wide kind of spread of interest among the potential audience. As we kind of go mid-funnel, then you're kind of looking into more positioning and influencing. And then at the bottom of the funnel, what you might use the webinar for would be more demonstrating and closing. So for instance, if you were in a tech company, you might actually be doing a product demo over the webinar. So it's someone who's already interested. They're really a potential client, and you're giving them quite a full view of how to use the software or the tool. That would be a kind of a classic example of kind of at that level of the marketing funnel. So that would be your first step, is to go, well, why am I doing this? What am I hoping to achieve by it? What am I hoping to reach audience-wise? And then we want to look a little bit further into who your audience actually are. So I've worked a long time in my career in magazines, and we would do a lot of away days where we would really sit around and pinpoint who our reader actually was. And it's a really useful exercise for any company or any brand to think about, who are we trying to reach? Who do we want to talk to? Because you change your tone depending on who you're talking to. So if you're talking to, you know, industry or practitioners, then you're going to have quite a different tone depending on if you're talking to the general public. For instance, even say if you were a beauty salon owner, if you were giving a talk to other beauticians on how to use a new tool, you might have a very different way of speaking about it than if you were talking to potential customers about how to do a little at-home facial while you can't go to beauty salons during COVID. So you really want to think about who you're going to speak to, and then that will help you start to build and plan your webinar based on what you think they're going to want to hear about and what tone you're going to take talking to them. So you'll also maybe think a bit about demographics such as age group, you know, are they comfortable with the technology, male, female, where they're living, all that sort of thing. So that will help you just kind of get those pre-planning stages done. Then we're going to think about what's it going to be about, which is obviously a very important element of it. And I suppose now at the moment, because we're using webinars in place of real life events, you might want to kind of think about, what were you doing pre-COVID that you're trying to replace? So, you know, were you going to a trade fair and setting up a stand and talking to people face to face there, shaking hands, giving them samples of your product, creating those relationships that way? And how can you kind of reimagine this in the online world? So essentially your webinar is like setting up your stall online, and then maybe the Q&A section of the webinar where people can type into the chat is how you can replace that face-to-face interaction with people where they can ask you questions about your product at a trade fair. You know, also like a sales demo, you might do a product demo on a webinar format. So you could be screen sharing and then going through your software and showing how you would use it while you're doing the webinar. And that's quite a useful kind of closing, kind of end of funnel way of using a webinar to really kind of get customers used to your product. So, you know, you can also do it for very corporate things like earnings presentations, AGMs, that sort of thing. I know, for instance, like our local golf club did one to do their AGM, that sort of thing. So there's lots of different ways you can use it to reimagine stuff that would have happened in real life, but now we're using online versions of it. So another thing to think about then is, what are my audience's pain points? What problems do they have? So if you're going to look into that kind of top of funnel thought leadership positioning, then you want to think about, what are topics of interest to them? What sort of general informative webinars can I give them, such as like this kind of thing. You might think about trends in your industry. You might think about new innovations that you have kind of a good knowledge of that maybe the broader audience wouldn't, that you can explain to them or show them. New regulations. So a couple of years ago when GDPR came in, that's the General Data Protection Regulation, which we will return to later. That sort of thing needs a lot of explaining to people to get them used to understanding how it will affect their business, things like that. So those are lots of things that you can kind of look at your business or you're working in your industry and think about how you could actually translate that into something informative that you can create webinar content around for your audience. So then we're going to look at my favorite bit is the tools we can use. And there are so many different softwares and tools online these days that can make creating things and doing things so much easier, so much more fun, so much more engaging for your audience, and interactive as well. So I kind of split this into three sort of areas that you can bring these things in on. So there's the design stage, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the medium that you're going to do it through, and then little things that can increase interactivity. So there are loads of different free tools out there. I was kind of recommend a few that I would commonly use and that I'm used to you. And then I went just to look around to see what else there was. And there are so many, it's actually mind-boggling. So depending on, I suppose, what kind of enterprise you're in, or if you're a solo entrepreneur, you know, you might be working for a big company that has a massive budget to use something like the On24 platform that I mentioned earlier, that really is quite a, you know, sophisticated solution. Or you might be just an entrepreneur or a freelancer who wants to do some things themselves. And then you might want to look at something that is, you know, has a free version that you can use. So there is a mind-boggling amount of stuff out there. And I actually found a website called Capterra, which is Capterra. And Capterra actually helps you find the right tools for what you want. So if you type in webinar on Capterra, you can see all of the tools that they would rate and review in terms of what you could use to do a webinar. And there are hundreds, it's mind-boggling. So there are so many things out there. I'm just going to go through a brief little few that I use and that I would recommend. So at the design stages, and in this I would kind of include designing your actual kind of how it's going to go, what's going to go into it, as well as the actual literal design of your slides. And then we'll just throw a little bit of the marketing bit in here as well. So I want to mention, first of all, I've thrown a few logos onto this slide, so they will help you remember them if any of these tools resonate with you. The first one I wanted to mention, and this is really more for workshops than webinars, but I think it's a really great tool. It's called Session Lab. So Session Lab actually helps you build the modules in a workshop. And it's great for kind of giving you ideas of things you could put in, such as little icebreaker exercises, things like that. It's really good for anyone who's doing a design sprint, and it'll give you lots of inspiration of actually what you're going to use in it. You could basically get a whole design sprint layout from this and run it within your company. So it's also quite good for just getting you into the kind of blocking things out in time if you are trying to kind of plan how long it's going to take, because that can be quite difficult at the start when you're not used to doing things. Where, you know, I've kind of got used to knowing maybe how long I need to speak on each slide for. And that sort of comes a bit more naturally when you've done a few, but at the start it can be a bit daunting going, well, actually, how much do I need here? Excuse me. And another little tip in terms of that would be that we generally speak about 135 to 150 words a minute. So if you were really scripting yourself, you probably want to have, you know, your time multiplied in minutes of your webinar multiplied by about 150. And that will give you an idea of really how much to script. And obviously I'd say, don't script it, don't read it, you know, do a webinar about something you know about so that you can speak naturally rather than reading off something. And I usually never actually read off anything, but I do have some notes with me today because I had a few statistics that I know I won't remember. So for that, I would say, yeah, sure, put something in your speaker notes or have your iPad beside you that you can check, or have some notes if you want. But generally, I try and just talk as naturally as possible. So have it all planned out, have maybe a few notes just to remind you what order you're going in, and have as little as possible on your slides, because good slide design for presentations would usually say 8 words max on a slide. So that's really just to keep people focused on what you're saying rather than keeping people focused on reading the slide, because people can read faster than you can talk. So if they read it off the slide, they'll just tune out of what you're saying and not listen to you. So to really keep people engaged, have the slides fun and bright, but don't rely on them to have all of your content on them. So today's beautiful slides are brought to you courtesy of Canva, which I use to design the slides. And they have some really great templates. So their templates are a lot more exciting than what you're going to get in your Microsoft Word or your whatever it's called on Mac, Pages and Keynote on Mac. So that is the pro version, so you do have to pay for that. You can't get into their presentation templates on the free version, although you can do a lot of fun little marketing stuff with the free version of Canva. But it's a great graphic design tool for people who aren't graphic designers. And even if you are a graphic designer, it is much cheaper than paying for InDesign graphic design software. So I find it really handy, really fun. It has loads of brilliant templates, and it's great for making your content a little bit more engaging. Then the other bit I wanted to just mention is in terms of getting the word out there about your webinar, which is really important. It's like if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it. So if you do a webinar and nobody's at it, what is the point? So two great things are, you might already know these, they're very well known, MailChimp for sending out newsletters, and Eventbrite, which is a really good tool because people will find stuff on Eventbrite and it kind of does some of your marketing for you. And I've done Speak Up Club workshops online, which I sold tickets for through Eventbrite. And really all of my ticket sales came from Eventbrite and I've done social media marketing campaigns as well on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. But really mostly Eventbrite actually sold them for me because people will search things they're interested in, or they may already have an Eventbrite account or get a newsletter from Eventbrite because they bought a concert ticket through it and have just come to find stuff through it. So you can set things up for free on Eventbrite. They don't need to be paid webinars and it doesn't cost you anything to use it. Eventbrite only take a commission if you're actually selling tickets. So if you want to give a webinar as a kind of a marketing tool for your business, put it up on Eventbrite, put it to free, doesn't cost you a thing, and you might actually find that you will get some people coming to it through that method, and you'll be able to track where they've registered. So that's a really good one. Then the medium. So today we're using Zoom, and I think a lot of people are really familiar with that, really comfortable with it. And that is a huge advantage, is that both maybe an outside presenter that you're getting in, or the people who are the audience kind of used to it, and it's a well-known brand name as such that people who maybe weren't so good with technology have kind of mastered at this stage, very commonly used. The other things you can use are, I think some of you will probably recognize the Microsoft Teams logo there, on the purple logo on the bottom. And then the green and blue logo there is Cisco WebEx, which I don't think is as commonly used, but is totally worth looking at. And they actually have a free plan that is, I'm just going to actually double check because I won't remember, but I think you can have 50 minutes of meeting time and up to a maximum of 100 meeting participants. So that's actually quite a lot for a free plan. If you wanted to do a webinar, to get 100 participants would be doing very well. So I think that's one that's totally worth looking at. And then the other one there that looks like a block of butter is actually a new company called Butter, who I've used and found great. And for individuals, they're completely free. And they have some quite fun interactive stuff in their kind of platforms. So they have polls, they have emoji usage for reactions, so you can give a thumbs up. You can spotlight different speakers. And I think it's really aimed at workshops, but it's, if you want to get people out of their kind of very officey, day-to-day worky kind of zone, using Butter gives it a little bit more of a fun online environment, I think. And also it's free, so that's always good. And then when we come to interaction, so this is the thing that I tried to give you there at the start, was to use a poll. Now Zoom allows you to do polls in it, and so does Butter, which we've mentioned already. But if you want to, you can also use different ways of doing that interaction. So AHA Slides and Menti are two that are quite good for doing polls. And you can actually put up a scannable QR code in your presentation. People can scan it with their phones, and then they can actually reply to the polls using their phone. So I actually came across AHA Slides doing an online table quiz and we used AHA Slides for that, so everyone used their phones but could see each other on Zoom. So that's quite a nice way of doing that as well. Mentimeter is kind of similar, probably a little more graphically better looking one. And I think not as cheap on the kind of free trial, or you can do like a once-off with AHA where you just pay for an event, which is very, very reasonably priced. So depending on your budget, or if you're just testing things out and want to give them a go, they're worth looking at. And then the other one I think is amazing for interaction is Miro, which is an online whiteboard. So if you're doing a workshop kind of thing, or you want to really get people engaged in creating ideas or interacting with each other, this can be really good for, you know, doing little post-it notes on it and things like that. More of a workshop one, but I think worth mentioning. And also it is one that is already integrated in Butter, definitely, and really useful. So things like that are really good. The other thing some of the kind of platforms allow you to do, I know Butter does as well, is to preset kind of YouTube video links if you want to play a video, and things like that. Also, breakout rooms are something that I'd really advise if you can, and if it suits what you're doing. Okay, again, a bit more workshopy, but I think bringing in workshop things where you can does create a bit more interaction. So there are some instances where they're good to use, and that means you can literally set a number of people that will end up in a breakout room. So it could be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. You can randomize them, or you can plan who's going with who, send them off to discuss a topic, and then come back to the group and have a group discussion and maybe share something from their breakout room that came up. So that's also a good way to, especially if it's quite a long day or a long event kind of thing, that can be useful to use, but more workshop than webinar, but I think just worth mentioning. So a few little things about scheduling then. So when you have all your webinar ready, you've got it beautifully designed, you've planned, you're using videos, you're going to have a breakout room or whatever you're going to do, when are you going to do it? So the best day for webinar attendance is apparently Wednesday. And no surprise that we're here today. But actually just over the last year, webinar attendance has gone up so much that pretty much any weekday is good at this stage. Just according to some research from that company On24, who are kind of the very strong in their data collection from webinars, they found that Fridays and Tuesdays have jumped a lot, but Monday has been the breakaway day, increasing in webinar attendance by 441% in 2020. So that's a lot. The best time is apparently 11 a.m. And again, no surprise that we're here at an 11 a.m. webinar on a Wednesday. But as a general rule, kind of an hour or so either side of lunchtime is generally pretty good as well. So then we want to spread the word once we have our schedule set. So apparently the best day to send a promotional email is Tuesday by a 3-point margin, but we'll actually just return to that again a bit later in terms of you do want to send a few reminders as well, because I know personally I sign up to events online and then forget to go. So you kind of want to keep getting people, give them a little nudge. So give them a good amount of time to sign up, give them a long sign up window, but then also you need to keep reminding them or they'll completely forget, because we don't kind of have the same, I have to go to this thing with a webinar or an online event as we do with a real life event. So, you know, where you might have had to organize a babysitter or, you know, think about transport to get there, all of those other things that kind of lodge it in your mind aren't quite there, because it's just, I just have to open my laptop. So we do need to kind of remind people a bit more. And then broadcast on the day. So on the day, we do tend to find that everyone who registered for your webinar, you might be amazed and be like, oh my God, so many people are coming. No, they're not. They'll have forgotten, even if they got your reminder. So about half the people are coming. So don't be disappointed if you do run a webinar and you think you've got 30 people signed up and then 15 people turn up. That's absolutely industry standard. So I wouldn't be upset about it. You've done very well if you get about a 55% conversion rate from registrants to attendees. And I would say anywhere from 35 to 45 is kind of average. So you can also, though, keep the stuff available afterwards. So live webinars are great. They allow for that interaction. We'll be doing a bit of a Q&A after this where you can ask me any questions. That's really kind of the point, is that you get your questions in. It's as close to live as you can get. But, you know, there's a lot of useful information, so it will be made available afterwards. So Iconic put all theirs on their YouTube channel, so you can find an absolute wealth of information, library of bingeable content there. And that's a really good thing to do as well, if you can upload things to your YouTube channel and then embed them on your website, so that you have a library of content that you've created as well that people can come back to. So doing your webinar setup, this is something that I think people have become a lot better at, because we're all used to doing our Zoom calls and things like that at this stage. but just to briefly run through it. So first of all, ergonomics, make sure you're sitting comfortably, that you're sitting up straight, that you're not kind of slouching and leaning up to the side or anything like that. I would always recommend, if you're using a laptop like I am, to put it up on a shoebox at the very least, so that your camera is level with your eyes. And you should kind of be filling the screen, not, you know, right up close to the laptop. You don't want to look kind of scary, but just a nice kind of arm's length distance away from the camera, bit of space either side of you. You know, make sure that you either use a background or have a nice clean background behind you. There's nothing worse than seeing someone, you know, in their bedroom with an unmade bed or something like that. So just, if you have to do it in your bedroom or your bathroom or your utility room, put up a background maybe behind you, or try and angle it so that you can't really see the detritus of life around you. Then the other thing is lighting. So especially if you're trying to, you know, make yourself seem approachable and build a connection with people online, if you are silhouetted and your face is just dark, then people can't really see you. It's much harder for them to concentrate on what you're saying when you are hard to see. They can't see your facial features. They can't see, you know, any kind of gestures or things like when you're talking. So make it easy for people to see you, and make sure that if you can, face a window or face the light. And if you're really going professional, you might set up a ring light behind your computer. So these are what all like fashion bloggers and makeup influencers would be using, but they're very flattering and they put a very even light on your face. So today where I'm sitting, I'm actually facing a really big window, but I also have a light behind my computer just to give a little bit more light, because I'm not bang on straight up against the window. So lighting is really important because you want people to see you like it's a real life situation. And if you're in shadow, it's really not giving that, and it just looks a little bit unprofessional. So the other thing you might want to think about is your camera and your microphone. I'm using a MacBook Air, so the camera and the mic seem to be okay. I've had no complaints. I'm not using any external things, but you may want to. So it's really important to make sure that your camera, again, is in the right position if you're using an external webcam. And then also, in terms of microphones, you could use something similar to a podcast recording microphone, which would be a USB mic that just plugs straight into the USB on your computer and will pick up really well and give you quite a good sound. But you could do a little test run over Zoom with someone to see if actually, you know, a lot of laptops these days have quite good cameras and mics, so you don't necessarily need to go to that extra expense, and you could start small and kind of build it up later if you want to professionalize a bit more. Another quick easy fix is if you have the earphones from your phone that have a little microphone kind of around here, and if you're having trouble sometimes putting in that earphone and speaking into that mic can be good. You might need to hold it, the little microphone bit, up close to your mouth, but if you're having trouble with your sound, that can be a fix. So then follow-up is really important if you're using it as a marketing tool. So I won't be following up with you, but you probably will get an email from Iconic afterwards, and they might give you a little customer satisfaction survey, see what other events you'd be interested in, that sort of thing. So I did mention GDPR earlier, and I just want to touch on it again because I think it's really important, if you're new to this, that you make sure you comply with it. Now, you probably won't get the Data Protection Commissioner coming after you if you're a small company, and I think they have the bigger things and bigger fish to fry, but it's good to stay within the letter of the law anyway about this. So webinars are a great way of generating leads. You're getting people to sign up, you're getting their data, but when you are getting them to sign up, it's really important to only ask for the data that you need. So I would ask people for their name, obviously, their email, because I want to tell them when the webinar is and send them the link. If it's a workshop, often I will ask for their phone number, because if they're late, I might want to check if they can get in okay, or if they want to pass it on their place on to somebody else. So I don't always ask for that, but sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll ask maybe if they are, you know, what their job title and work is, because that will actually help me build something that is more tailored to them. But if you don't need, the general rule is if you don't need a piece of information, don't ask for it. The less information that you're holding on people, the less chance that you will contravene any general data protection regulations. So it's basically, it's an EU law. You can look up GDPR.eu if you really want to deep dive into it, but it's all about collection and processing of personal information. So it's fine to send out kind of follow-up things in terms of sending out the slides or sending out maybe some worksheets that go with the presentation. It's allowed under GDPR to send out a customer satisfaction kind of survey that's considered a legitimate interest. But really, just to be on the safe side, anything else you want to send that would come under the kind of marketing emails umbrella, you should give an opt-in for that or an opt-out for that. So that's where you see the little box that you tick to consent to receiving other emails. A company called Active Campaign kind of recommends that you do an 8 email campaign around your webinars. So I'm just going to tell you what those would be as a little recap. So first of all, when someone registers for your email or for your webinar, you would do a post-registration follow-up confirmation email. So that's thank you for registering for this webinar. 1 week out from the webinar, you send them a reminder. 1 day before the webinar, you send them a reminder. Day of the webinar, probably like an hour before, you could send them a final reminder. Then when they have watched the webinar, you could send a thank you for attending and maybe say something like, we're going to send you out a recording of the webinar, or when it's processed, you might send another email to go, here is a recording of the webinar, or here's, and then you could, they're saying you could do a second follow-up with additional resources, which might be like the slides, worksheets, things like that. Some of these you might want to concertina into one email because it seems like a lot, but that's what they were saying to kind of keep pushing the marketing agenda. And then another follow-up would be future events that we're holding. Personally, I feel that the thank you for attending, first follow-up, second follow-up, third follow-up is pushing the limits of GDPR, and I would put them into one follow-up email unless they had consented to additional marketing emails. And then finally, yeah, I would highly recommend that if you are doing webinars, that you do put them up on your YouTube channel. If you're doing a Zoom recording, you can record it in Zoom. So you will have the video ready-made, ready to upload to your YouTube channel. And then from YouTube, you can embed that link into your website. So you have that content library building. And another thing is that if you are doing a customer satisfaction kind of survey afterwards, do ask what other topics people would like to see, because that will help you respond better to the needs of your audience. And then you're kind of creating this sort of flywheel effect where like you're giving them this experience online, so they're engaging, you're gathering a little bit of data on them. From that, you're finding out what they want, and then you can create more experiences for them online and kind of keep that wheel turning. So thank you very much for listening. I've been Deanna O'Connor, and if you want to see anything more about what I do, I'm just going to give you one link to look at. You can find any social media links and that sort of thing there, and also some previous webinars on speakupclub.ie.